The ship that might not be Titanic. Hello, viewers. You've all seen it. James Cameron's blockbuster movie, Titanic. Because of that film, almost everyone on Earth knows the story of the ship that sank. If you showed someone that famous image, the massive bow of the ocean liner cutting through the Atlantic, they'd say without hesitation, that's the Titanic. But here's the thing. That ship in the movie, it's not actually the Titanic. It's a ship called the Olympic, Titanic's identical twin. And that's exactly where our conspiracy begins. Did the Titanic actually sink, or was it deliberately sunk? And if so, was it really the Titanic that went down, or was it the Olympic wearing Titanic's name? Let's find out, but first, let's go back to the beginning. Early 1900s America. The early 1900s was an era of mass migration. Millions of Europeans were chasing a dream, the American dream. And the only way to get there was by ship across the Atlantic Ocean. Now, shipping was big business, hugely profitable, and the competition was fierce, especially on the Atlantic route. Think of it like today's airline industry. You want a cheap ticket from Dhaka to New York? You'd pick Turkish Airways or Cathay Pacific. You want the premium experience? You go Emirates or Qatar Airways. Back then, White Star Line was the budget-friendly option, popular with ordinary people because of its lower ticket prices. But the wealthy elite? They weren't impressed. Enter J.P. Morgan. In 1902, one of the most powerful men in America turned his eyes toward the shipping industry. J.P. Morgan, banker, business titan, owner of what felt like half of America, formed a company called the International Mercantile Marine Company, or IMM. He began buying up shipping companies one by one. In 1903, he purchased White Star Line, lock, stock, and barrel. His goal? Transform White Star Line into a luxury brand, make it the choice of the ultra-rich. Think of it like Toyota launching Lexus to compete with Mercedes-Benz, a separate premium identity. In 1907, Morgan commissioned Belfast's shipbuilding giant, Harland and Wolff, to construct three massive, luxurious sister ships. Their names? Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic. Nearly identical in design, the largest moving objects ever built by human hands. But here's something important, and remember this for later. White Star Line didn't pay for these ships with Morgan's own money. They borrowed heavily from British investors, using their existing ships as collateral. That detail might seem boring right now, but it becomes the foundation of the entire conspiracy. The first of the three ships, Olympic, launched on June 14, 1911. 8 days later, she arrived in America, and immediately things started going wrong. On arrival day, she scraped against a tugboat called the O.L. Halenbeck, causing around $100,000 worth of damage. Fine, minor incident. But then, September 20th, 1911, the big accident. Olympic collided with a British Royal Navy cruiser HMS Hawke. The damage was severe. An investigation was launched, and the verdict? Olympic's crew was at fault. The result? Olympic's insurance claim was rejected entirely. Now remember, all three ships had been insured through Lloyd's Bank of London. No insurance payout meant White Star Line had to pay out of pocket for repairs on a ship that cost a fortune to build before they'd earned a single pound from it. Their options were grim. Scrap the Olympic or patch it up and keep going. They chose to patch it up. Olympic was sent back to Belfast for repairs. Meanwhile, construction on Titanic was rushed. They wanted both ships operational by 1912, generating revenue as fast as possible. January 1912. It gets worse. After the rushed repairs, Olympic went out again and promptly broke a propeller. Back to Belfast she went. And this is the moment, right here in March 1912, when both Olympic and Titanic sat side by side in Belfast's Harland and Wolff shipyard. The last time both ships were ever photographed together. And according to conspiracy theorists, this is when the switch happened.
The conspiracy theory was largely popularized by British author Robin Gardner, who wrote a series of books on Titanic starting in 1995. His most famous, Titanic, the ship that never sank. Gardner's argument goes like this. In March 1912, when both ships sat in the Belfast shipyard, they were quietly switched. The subtle differences between Olympic and Titanic, tiny visual details, were sanded away. The names on the hulls were swapped, and the battered, accident-prone Olympic was now sailing under the name Titanic. But why? The answer, according to conspiracy theorists, insurance fraud on a massive scale. The plan was simple and audacious. Send the disguised Olympic out on Titanic's maiden voyage, deliberately sink it, collect the insurance money on Titanic, solve White Star Line's financial crisis in one stroke. And meanwhile, the real Titanic, now sailing as Olympic, would continue operating for years. Monstrous? Yes, but was there any evidence? According to Harland and Wolff's own records, Olympic had 16 bow portholes on the port side. Titanic was designed with only 14. But photographs taken during Titanic's maiden voyage clearly show 16 portholes. The debunkers' response: Titanic was modified just before her maiden voyage. 2 portholes were added during sea trials. Harland and Wolff logged the change. Even ChatGPT confirms this. Clue number 2, the windows. On Olympic, the B-deck forward windows were narrow. On Titanic, they were wider and more numerous. When researchers examined the Titanic wreck, discovered in 1985 by Robert Ballard, they found that the B-deck window configuration looked more like Olympic's design. The conspiracy theorists went wild with this image. The debunkers' response? Again, last-minute modifications. By the time both ships sat side by side in March 1912, they had been cross-modified. Titanic gained some Olympic features, and vice versa. Clue number 3, the lifeboats. When the Titanic set sail, she carried 20 lifeboats. 4 of them were collapsible. Stenciled on those lifeboats, the word Olympic. Why, ask the conspiracy theorists, would Titanic carry lifeboats labeled Olympic? The answer is actually mundane. Imagine a bus company running a fleet of identical vehicles. During maintenance, seat covers get switched between buses. Labels end up on the wrong vehicles. When both ships were docked together, spare equipment was shared freely. A lifeboat from Olympic ended up on what was officially Titanic. Simple logistics. Clue number 4, the propeller number. Olympic's yard number was 400. Titanic's was 401. These numbers were stamped on components like propellers. Remember that damaged Olympic propeller? When it was replaced, spare parts built for Titanic, stamped 401, were used, so one of Olympic's propellers now bore Titanic's yard number. The Titanic wreck's propeller shows 401. Conspiracy theorists say, proof, they switched the ships. Debunkers say, of course it says 401. That is Titanic's propeller number. That's the most normal thing possible. This is conspiracy theory logic at its finest, the same fact interpreted in completely opposite directions. Whether it was the real Titanic or an Olympic in disguise, on April 10, 1912, the ship departed Southampton, England. Destination, New York City. Tickets ranged from £7 in third class, around $50 today, to £870 for the grandest parlor suites. That's roughly $130,000 in today's money. On board, some of the wealthiest people on Earth. John Jacob Astor IV, American real estate magnate. Net worth at the time, approximately $87 million. That's roughly $3 billion today, one of the richest men alive. Benjamin Guggenheim, business magnate from the legendary Guggenheim family. Isidor Straus, businessman and former U.S. congressman. And sailing with them, J.P. Bruce Ismay, chairman and managing director of White Star Line itself. Also noteworthy, J.P. Morgan was originally scheduled to be on this voyage. He canceled at the last minute, citing illness. 2 days after Titanic sank, Morgan celebrated his 75th birthday in France. The conspiracy machine loved that detail.